Oh, dude. I wouldn't say I was the biggest fan of Ross, but I have been watching Ross since he was on That Guy with the Glasses. I sound that old. Anyways, I was just... Yes, he was. That is a forgotten part of the story. He was on That Guy with the Glasses. He was one of the people in That Guy with the Glasses. I think. I'm 99% certain he is, but there's a little part of me... Was? Oh, yes, he definitely was. Because I remember Friedman's Mind being on there. I now need to confirm for myself if he was. Even though I'm almost... Ross Scott. Was he on That Guy with the Glasses? Yes, he was. I was right. My memory proves solid nonetheless. I used to be very obsessed with That Guy with the Glasses, like when I was a teenager. Did that take you a while? How was it? How was the feeling? Who else was on That Guy with the Glasses? You'll never believe this. Dan Olson on That Guy with the Glasses. Really? I think about that. If they didn't totally screw it up, they had Dan Olson, they had Lindsay Ellis, they had a bunch of surprisingly popular people. Well, it's really surprising to think that I know, right? It's really surprising to think that he was on there. This is the fun... Yes, she was. That's how I first came to know her. This is the funniest one. This is a thing that isn't really reported very often in the history of That Guy with the Glasses. Do you know who was almost on the site as a contributor? You're never going to guess who was on the computer. And when I tell you this, you will laugh nonstop at the idea that Dan Olson, Lindsay Ellis, and this person were nearly together in the same production, in this group together. You're never going to get... No, that makes too much sense. That would be too... You are literally... Okay, it was Darkside Phil. Yeah, so think of it. There could have been a time where Lindsay Ellis, Dan Olson, and Darkside Phil were considered, oh, they're part of the same group of people. No, I don't. Oh, I know that. He did one about Spoonie. I remember that one. I loved Spoonie when I was a kid. I hate what's happened. Anyways, I don't think there's anything bad that came out. I wonder who it was. I don't remember that. No, Doug has been married for pretty much, seemingly quite happily for years. I don't know. But Bob, don't you love the masterpiece that is To Boldly Flee? Isn't that your favorite movie ever? That's on, let's say that's on level. I don't know. At a certain point, I have to temper myself with this, because at a certain point, I always think making fun of the Channel Awesome stuff is as cringy as Channel Awesome could be. What is more cringe? To Boldly Flee and all that stuff, or still caring about To Boldly Flee 20 years later? You know what I mean? That's so funny. Holy shit. As somebody who has watched, I think, almost all of them, I'm going to throw this out there. This is going to be controversial. I don't know if this will be controversial, but I think Kick-Assia is probably the best one of the three. Which sounds absurd, I know, but I think at least Kick-Assia attempts for satire on some level. I don't know. The other three, let me see. If I can, I just need to find an eraser. I'll be right back. I can't find an eraser. So, here's the thing. With these three movies, they're all bad. So, bad is a relative term. So, what you have to do is instead judge it. They're all bad. So, but what you have to do then is instead judge it by the relative bad. The problem with Suburban Nights and To Boldly Flee is that they both attempt to do more epic storytelling, but they're not capable of it. They're trying to do... So, to be fair, it's not... I don't think they're as delusional to say, oh, we made the equivalent of Star Wars, but they're trying to at least do something on the level of, I don't know, what is it, like Dark Star or something? The early Clerks, but more of a... There's a very early John Carpenter movie, his first movie, is it Dark Star or Black Star? Which has got is sort of a semi-space, is a parody of space adventure movies. And I think in their head, they're probably doing something at least on the level of that, which is low-budget sci-fi comedy. But they're not even really achieving that level. They're like, it's amateur theater production level. So much so that, anyways, I have theories of how they could have pulled it off. But so you have to look at it on that. And the only one that I think gets almost to a satirical point and has actually maybe a little bit more of a pointed view of satire, and this is going to sound insane because it doesn't achieve it, but it has actually a satirical edge that's funny, is Kick-Ass. And the reason it's kind of funny is because it has an idea, because it's a parody of the failure of government and how somebody can let just a little bit of power get to his head. The fact that they nearly get into a war and try and hurt each other over a micronation that probably isn't real is kind of funny. That is a funny premise for a movie. And occasionally they do, it's a funny idea that a micronation gets taken over by a dictatorship. And the story, it is a small man in real life who uses this little bit of power and lets it go to his head almost immediately. That is an actual satirical edge with an actual plot. They don't pull it off and they're not good at it. And the story doesn't work because they also have to do all of the review characters and they buy into themselves as it for a minute. And it just doesn't work. But there's a good movie that could have been made from that premise. You know what I mean? there's a good movie that could have been made from that premise, and occasionally it gets to the point where it does actual satire of something real. The problem is, I've thought a lot about this. Knights of Kikaskia is not funny. It feels like watching embarrassing LARPers walk through a park, which is what it is, and To Boldly Flee is totally out of their realm, and they should not have been doing it. The only one where they make a movie within their capability that they could have theoretically made, which I know sounds crazy. Kikaskia is a movie that they could have made, they theoretically could have pulled off on that budget, not with their skill level, but somebody with the budget that they had could have pulled off a Kikaskia. I could see the plot of Kikaskia becoming a real indie movie that does work. And it actually has a bit of a satirical edge to it. It doesn't work, but it could have worked. That could have been a real movie. I'm giving so much credit to Doug Walker, but I could see how Kikaskia, I always thought Kikaskia could have been a real movie. I don't think Doug Walker could have made it, and I think it is ruined by the need to cameo. If he had just made that movie, that could have been funny. I don't think Walker has the capability to write it, and that might be like me, Pop. That might be inviting too much comparison onto me, but I could... God, that was a strangely impassioned defense of Kikaskia, a movie I think is very bad.